Hi, this is Mirna with Knitting with Mirna, and today's project is a garter stitch scarf. For this project, we're going to be using Yarn Inspiration Cakes by Karen and in a vanilla bean colorway. This yarn is 80% acrylic, 20% wool, and is a worsted weight yarn. We're only going to need one cake, meaning one ball of yarn, to complete this beautiful scarf. Also, we're going to be needing a pair of size 8 needles. We're going to need a crochet hook to attach fringe at the end. That's optional if you want to add fringes or not. We're going to need a measuring tape and a pair of scissors. I'm offering for sale the yarn, crochet hook, and the knitting needles. This kit is available in my Etsy shop, and the link is in the description below. Knitting with Myrna. So it's up to you if you want to purchase the kit from my store or if you can go to any other store, a local store that sells yarn. So let's get started. First, we're going to cast on 30 stitches. I'm going to use the long tail cast on method. I'm going to leave about 36 inches before doing my slip knot. I have a tutorial in the description below on how to make a slip knot, so I'm just going to briefly describe what I'm doing. So if you need to review the tutorial, just check the description below. So wrap the yarn around your two fingers, index and middle finger. Bring the yarn tail through the loop like this. Pull the tail through. There's your loop, and that's a slip knot. Now you're going to insert the needle through the loop like this. Pull the strand of yarn closer to the needle. You want it to be snug, not tight, okay? With your left hand, you're going to take your index finger and your thumb, put them together as if you're going to pinch something. Put those fingers through both strands of yarn. So your other 3 fingers are going to be holding the rest of the strand of the yarn. Spread your fingers apart like this. Bring the needle down so your hand and the yarn looks a little bit like a slingshot. So bring the needle to your thumb, go under the yarn, take it to your index finger, go under the yarn, and bring the yarn through the loop. Release the thumb and pull. Again, bring the needle to your thumb, go under the yarn, bring the needle over to your index finger, go under the yarn, bring the yarn and the needle through the loop, pull, release the thumb, and there's your bind on. Awesome. So we have all 30 stitches cast onto your needle. And this is the needle that you're going to be on your left hand if you're knitting with your right hand, if you're right-handed. So with your right hand, you're going to hold a needle that has no stitches. And this is going to be the needle that you're going to be knitting with. The first thing you're going to do is insert that right needle into the first stitch and going under that left needle. So you're going under the needle through the stitch. You see that? So you're creating like a X or a T. Now you take your working yarn, and that is the yarn that is attached to the ball, and you're going to wrap it around the right needle. Bring the needle and the yarn through that loop and release the stitch on your left needle. So pull that tail just a little bit, the tail that you use for your cast on, pull it, and that will tighten that first stitch if it's too loose. Go to the second stitch. Again, go into the stitch, go under the left needle, wrap the yarn around the right needle, and bring the right needle and the yarn through the stitch on the left needle and release that stitch. There it is. Again, this is your knit stitch, and this is the stitch that we're going to be knitting. Every row and every stitch is going to be a knit stitch to create a garter stitch. So now we have 30 stitches. So we're going to turn our work around. Make sure that all your stitches are nice and straight. And this is the tail from the cast on. You don't want to knit with this, okay? You're going to find yourself in trouble if you start doing that. Okay, so now let's go to our, what is it, second row? Yes, second row. So we're moving right along. So this first stitch, be a little careful with it when you knit this stitch. Make sure that you pull your working yarn down, okay? Because what happens with this stitch is that it tends to be standing like this. And if you're not careful, you might knit through this loop and again this stitch. And that's the easiest way to add an unwanted stitch, adding stitches. And then instead of having a scarf that is all nice and straight, you end up with a scarf that is growing in the diagonal. And we don't want that, okay? So let's pull that strand, that yarn down, insert the right needle under into the stitch and under your left needle. There it is. So bring your working yarn forward, wrap it around the right needle, through the loop, and release that left stitch. Again, insert your needle, wrap it around, bring it through the loop and release the stitch. This is your knit stitch. We're going to continue doing this for, I think the pattern calls for 60 inches. So it seems like a long time to be knitting, but it actually goes really fast. It's very relaxing. It's fun to see how the colors start showing up from the yarn. With this yarn, you don't have to worry about adding a new yarn or changing colors or counting rows, because the yarn is going to do this for you. All you have to concentrate on is knitting this stitch back and forth, back and forth. And yeah, so your first scarf for some of you. How exciting! So you see now how the garter stitch starts showing. This stitch is really nice. I really like it because it doesn't roll up, not from the bottom, not from the sides. So your scarf is going to be really nice and flat and straight. It's going to look very professional. We're going to add fringe at the end, so don't worry about this tail. It's going to blend in nicely. If you don't want fringe, that's fine. I'm going to show you how to weave in this, and I'll have a description, link in the description below. Enjoy the process. Keep knitting, and let's see how we do. So here is my scarf, and I am pretty much at 65 inches long. And I am ready to bind off. Okay, bind off is what you do at the end of your knitting when you're closing your stitches, when you're releasing your needles. That means that you're done with your project. I have a tutorial on how to bind off. It's right in the description below. So just check if you need to go a little slower or if you need a refresher. So insert your right needle. You're going to basically knit 2 stitches. So we're gonna knit this first stitch, as you've been doing throughout the project. So there is 1, and here is the second stitch. There you have 2 stitches. See, is that it? 1 and 2. Great. Now take your left needle over to that first stitch and bring it over to that second stitch over. So back to the front stitch. So you just bind off 1 stitch. And we're going to continue doing the same bind off all the way to the end of this row. So that should be 30 stitches, the same amount that you cast on. You should be binding off 30 stitches. And we also want to bind off loosely. We want to have the same tension that we use when casting on. Okay, so I'm going to do this. Okay. And this is your last stitch. Back stitch goes over the front stitch. Now you don't need that left needle anymore. So this last stitch on the right hand needle, you're just going to pull it through, and that's the end of the yarn and your knitting. And that's how you bind off. Okay. Now the next step will be to add fringes, your fringe to your scarf, or to weave in this end if you just want to have a smooth, straight edge. Sorry. I'm going to show you how to add fringe, and I'll have a tutorial in the description below on how to weave in ends. Okay, so I personally like my fringe to be about 6 inches long. So for that, I will have to cut 12 inches of yarn. So here comes my measuring tape. I'm going to measure 12 inches and just a little bit more, like 12 and a half, to leave an allowance for the knot that you're going to tie. Okay, so I'm going to show you how we're going to do this. So here is my 12.5-inch long piece of yarn. I'm going to fold it in half like this. Then with my crochet hook, I'm going to insert it from the back to the front of the work. I'm going to take the yarn that I loop like this, hook it onto my crochet hook. I like to twist the yarn just a little bit to secure it in place. And then you're going to bring that loop through the fabric and out on the other side. So those two strands, that double strand, is going to go through the loop like so. And that's your knot. And this tail from the bind off or the cast on, you can use it and just blend it in with the rest of the fringe. Okay, so we have to add fringe all the way across this side and on the other side as well, right? So both sides are going to have fringe. So that's going to be a lot of measuring, 12.5, 12.5, and cutting. So to avoid doing that, I have this little plywood board that is already pre-measured and cut for 6.5-inch fringes. So what I do is that I just wrap my yarn around this board, or you could use a cardboard if you don't have a board around, and you just wrap it several times. And because I'm going to use up all the yarn that I have left for fringe, I really don't care like how many times I'm wrapping it. I'm just using all my yarn up. So you go around several times, and then you're gonna grab your scissors. Where are my scissors? Okay, here they are. And then you're going to cut one side only of the yarn that was attached to the board. And then you have all your strands pre-measured and pre-cut, ready to go. All you have to do is tie. And here I am back with my scarf, and my scarf is finished. I completed adding all my fringe, and I decided to go with two-tone fringe because I still had some of the beige or cream left. If this is too much for you, then just stick to whatever one color if you like. And that was the last part of my yarn cake, so I decided to use both colors. And I tied 2 strands, creating like a 4-strand fringe. Let's see. You can also play like hairstylist and trim these ends if you want them to be even. If it bothers you that it's uneven, then just trim them and make them even. I like mine to be uneven. I kind of like the movement. So now that your scarf is completed, you might want to hand wash it for the very first time because we've handled it a lot. Some of you probably traveled with it, or you're taking it out of your comfort area from your home or whatever, and you just want to wash it and make sure that it's clean. I recommend cold water, mild soap. You don't have to scrub it, just squeeze it like this. It's just soft and squishy. And then use a towel to squeeze out the excess water out and lay it flat to dry. Okay? And that completes our scarf. I'm gonna have all these tips and all the links to the pattern, to the yarn, to my Etsy shop, to all the stitches that we use. Everything's gonna be in the description below. So happy knitting, and follow me on my social media and tag me on my social media so I can see your first garter stitch scarf. Please subscribe, click like, leave a comment, and activate the bell so you can get notifications when I post other videos. Bye bye.